The Prime Minister is set to shuffle his cabinet tomorrow in what's already been a chaotic week for the Liberal Party and the Liberal government. After the surprise resignation of his Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau now has a number of big roles to fill on his front bench. Some of the jobs up for grabs are currently held by three ministers who are wearing multiple hats. When Chrystia Freeland resigned, Dominic LeBlanc took over her portfolio. We know he is looking to give up public safety. He's going to David McGuinty and keep finance and intergovernmental affairs. Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor took on employment when Randy Boissonnault stepped down. She's also Minister of Veterans Affairs. And Treasury Board President Anita Anand took over the transport file when Pablo Rodriguez resigned from Cabinet and caucus. Other positions that could be filled tomorrow belong to these ministers who have said they're not running in the next election. Minister of Housing, Sean Fraser, Philomena Tassi, who is the minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario. National Revenue Minister, Marie-Claude Bibeau, Minister of Sport, Carla Qualtrough, and Northern Affairs Minister, Dan Vandal. That leaves at least 8 positions up for grabs, unless there's structural changes. So which Liberal MPs could be getting a promotion tomorrow, and should the Prime Minister take some questions at this cabinet shuffle? Let's bring in the power panel for some cabinet shuffle speculation. Cameron Ahmad, why he happens to be a former head of communications to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He joins us tonight. Andrew Thompson is a former Saskatchewan NDP cabinet minister. Shachi Kurl is the president of the Angus Reid Institute. And here with me in the studio, Kate Harrison is a conservative political analyst. Cameron, it's been a week. What do you think the Prime Minister needs to say and should say tomorrow, or do we even think he will say anything at a cabinet shuffle that comes at the end of a pretty tough week?
Has it just been a week? Feels like
4, but yeah, it's been only one. Not even full. 4 days.
Yeah, not even. So, look, I think first and foremost, this cabinet shuffle is necessary ahead of the holiday season. There, as you laid out and as Rosie and Louis talked about before we've come on, a number of really good reasons beyond the announcement, the 2 resignations that were announced this week. There are multiple ministers wearing multiple hats. There are ministers who've announced they're not running again. There is an incoming Trump White House in just a few weeks. And putting aside all of the leadership questions and internal intrigue and chaos within the party, the government has to, the Prime Minister has to project a message of stability to the best of his abilities with a team that he can say is focused on governing the country, not focused on any internal nonsense, focused on governing the country, focused on preparing for Trump incoming White House, and being able to do that regardless of what his personal decision about his future is. I honestly don't know if he's going to make an announcement or an address tomorrow himself. I think there is a case to be made for him to do so. I think to say something to Canadians before the holiday season, to give a sense of clarity and stability and competence for the government and what it's doing. But I completely understand why he may feel and why many people may be telling him to reflect, because this week was a huge week. Emotionally draining for the entire team, a complete unexpected bombshell for him and his team. And I understand why he would want to wait until January to announce whatever his future might be.
Yeah, I get waiting until January, Cameron, to announce what your future might be. But the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance quit on the day of the fall economic statement and threw a written hand grenade into the government's priorities and focus right now. And he hasn't said a thing beyond we have family fights at Christmas. You know, I get it's hard on him as a human being, but he's the Prime Minister, man. Like he's going to change the front row of the government tomorrow. He's got to say something, doesn't he? Like, can he get away with not speaking?
I'd be inclined to say yes. Yes, okay. I think he probably should, but I'm just saying I understand why he wouldn't.
Okay. Well, Andrew, what are your thoughts on what we might hear and what we should hear from Justin Trudeau tomorrow?
Well, it is shocking that we've been so many days now with nothing being said by the Prime Minister, not necessarily about his future, but about the stability of the government. And I think that's one of the things that Canadians are watching for, is just how much disarray is this government in? Can the cabinet still govern effectively? So that's one of the things he's going to have to address tomorrow, and I think he's going to try and address tomorrow with the cabinet. He needs to put together a team that looks extremely competent in terms of being able to deal with the threat that the Trump tariffs are likely to bring. He's going to want to put a fresh face on domestically to be able to show that the Liberals, whether he's at the helm of it or not, actually do have something new to say to Canadians. So, Roy Roman used to say to me that, the cabinet maybe running the place. But it's actually the five faces in front of the camera that the citizens consider the government. And so you have to think about who are those five faces that are going to make Canadians go, oh, okay, I'm prepared to listen to what the Liberals have to say, which right now I think they're just tuning out. And then the third thing he has to do, and this is the trickiest part, especially given the current situation, is try to stabilize things within. Whatever his departure date is, and I mean, let's be honest, the way things look right now, he will not be the Prime Minister at some point in 2025. The question is whether he leaves now, causing a Liberal leadership race in the next few months, whether he leaves immediately, seems unlikely, or whether he goes down to defeat in the Commons. But those are pieces that he's obviously trying to figure out, is how to keep his own team together so that they don't implode. Liberal numbers have never looked worse than they do today. Liberal prospects have never looked worse, and he needs to try to start to turn that around on a number of fronts.
Kate, how do you demonstrate to the country that even though there's an obvious political instability, you can have a governing stability? Because, to use Andrew's point about the five faces of government, right now, all of them are Dominic LeBlanc. They need to broaden it out a little bit.
Many, many hats that he's wearing. I don't think that it is possible at this point for the Prime Minister to do that. This is a cabinet shuffle that is happening at a place of weakness. It is happening as a result of what we saw happen on Monday. Yes, there has been discussion about the possibility of this happening for some time. I think it would not be happening the Friday before Christmas unless it was absolutely necessary that the Prime Minister needed to do it. That is not communicating, pride in the front bench and pleasure with the team that is going to take on, the next term of government and potentially a Trump administration. So I think that regardless of the names we see tomorrow, maybe there's some outside voices or not, the decision-making rests at the top. It's, I think, not possible for the Prime Minister to sincerely communicate to Canadians that he's doing this out of any position other than an embattled one.
Shachi, what are your thoughts on tomorrow and what could be said or done?
Well, some things, as I think have been pointed out, have to be said, but I think that there are a lot of people who are going to be looking for explanations, for an apology, for something rational from the Prime Minister on this front, and they're just not going to hear it. This is not a leader who, when his back is against the wall, comes out and says, you know what, guys, you're right. You're right. I muffed that. I really screwed that up. Christian, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done it. We have seen him through crisis after crisis after crisis at a time when, from a human perspective, from a political watching and a political communication management perspective, the expectation is he's going to come out, put on the hair shirt, do a mea culpa, take a few steps back, or in some cases, all of the breathlessness Monday and Tuesday around, well, he's considering his options. He might just resign tonight. He's not going to give people who are expecting to hear those messages the satisfaction of giving them to him. It's not who he is. When I think about words to describe the Prime Minister in terms of how he acts in a crisis, how he acts when his back is against the wall politically, when it feels like things can't get any worse for him politically, the word is diffident. He is going to go out, I am sure, and say, look, yes, it's been a jangly week. Here we've got this new cabinet. We're going to reassure the markets. We're going to reassure our trade partners. We're going to reassure Canadians that the business of government continues, that we keep the lights on and keep doing what we have to do. Beyond that, I'm sure that many, many excellent pointed questions are going to be shouted at him, whether he takes those questions or not. We're not, the collective we, the collective watchers of politics are not going to hear the messages that they may be expected to hear because history has told us that that's not what he does and how he acts in a situation like this.
No, some sort of an explanation of the decision to move Chrystia Freeland, how that conversation went down, what she was offered, what was around it. Like, these are the holes we have. We only have sort of the version coming from the very upset side of that conversation. But, Cameron, the government does need a public safety minister. That's going to get a full-time one with David McGuinty. Tomorrow is what we're reporting. Nate Erskine-Smith is going to replace Sean Fraser as Minister of Housing. I'm hearing Darren Fisher is probably going to be the new minister from Nova Scotia, though I don't know the portfolio. Who do you think? I mean, you got people like Charles Sousa, Terry Duguid, people like that in the caucus who have been there a long time, have experience. Who do you think he can elevate into the cabinet to sort of stabilize things a little bit here?
Yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of good talent within the caucus to elevate. And I was happy to hear Dominic LeBlanc answer that question about Mark Carney today, which was definitive. Finally, that speculation and rumor mill can end, at least for now. But I think he's got plenty of talent to choose from. But the overriding objective, the priority of what he's going to communicate to the country tomorrow is beyond individual career ambitions of specific MPs. It's about telling the country that despite all the intrigue and despite all the chaos that you've witnessed over the past week, the government has its hand on it has it under control. It's able to get us through the holiday season. It's able to prepare for what's to come in January. And I think going back to what Chachi was saying, there is a good case to be made for him to come out this week, absolutely, and talk about what he's thinking, be honest and be humble and share his reflections in real time with Canadians if he hasn't made up his mind yet. But also there's a lot riding on it, right? There's the stability of the country, the position of the country right now to be able to deal with an incoming U.S. administration where we know so much is at stake. There's also the ability of the party to run a leadership race, which takes time, which takes months. And so I think it is understandable that he is trying to be strategic about when and what he says, and not rush something out in the heat of an extremely heated week and announcement.
Well, look, if he stays, then he's going to have to deal with whatever fallout that has. If he leaves, it's a question of, does he resign right away? Someone steps in, they have a leadership race, or does he stay on until the new leader is selected? There's no such thing as an interim prime minister. You're prime minister or you're not. But Andrew Cameron makes the point that tomorrow is not about the ambitions of individual MPs. For a lot of those individual MPs, it is, though, right? Sean Casey, the MP for Charlottetown, was on the show this week and said the cabinet shuffle has kept a lot of people in line because of the potential of getting elevated to cabinet for however long it lasts. And if they're not on that list, that calculation changes, and this could unleash a whole other crop of MPs who are frustrated, disappointed, and are ready to make the call for change.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely true. For an MP or an MLA waiting for the call to go into the cabinet, this is the single biggest power that a prime minister or a premier has to control their caucus. It is that hope springs eternal, that maybe there is that seat around that table finally for those who have been, waiting forever, wanting to demonstrate what they can do. When that is finally extinguished, that hope, it does move people into a very different spot. It doesn't always end up being a negative reaction to the leader. I mean, some people find other ways to use their talents, but at the end of a government, which is essentially what we're at now, there's really, the question will then become, how do you save as many seats as you can?
Right.
And that's something that the Prime Minister has not been able, at least, I'm not a Liberal obviously, but doesn't seem to have been able to communicate of how he, in any way, shape or form, turns that around.
Right.
And if anything, it looks more and more inevitable that the Conservatives are preparing to, will be asked to form a government after the election. What does that mean, as we head into, the Trump administration? And I think this is one of the things where, to be honest, the NDP's got to be thinking about this in terms of a non-confidence vote. Do you let this government stagger on well into the summer with all of the uncertainty and all of the uncertainty of what they're actually going to be able to do as a government, and the certainty that they're going to be replaced at the end of that? Or do you simply expedite this to try and give some kind of sense of stability to the country so you can put together an actual campaign to go and face Trump?
Well, Jagmeet Singh has said all options are on the table, and that's as clear as he is on that. His House leader, Peter Julian, was on the show saying if Justin Trudeau is still leader in February or March, we will vote non-confidence. Then the next day, Jagmeet Singh would not say that, saying, I don't want to be boxed in. So I don't know where the NDP are going on this, and I don't know if they do. But Kate, back to the risk of tomorrow of people who don't get in. I know this is meant to be a stabilizing cabinet shuffle, like we just got to fill these jobs so the government can run because they need full-time focused people. But there's going to be people left outside. If 10 to 12 people is 153 people in the caucus. Yeah,
I think part of the reason we haven't seen a shuffle happen so far is because there has been concern around the Prime Minister's office that this is going to create a caucus management problem for them. There are no more carrots left after tomorrow. There's not going to be another shuffle. So if there are MPs that have been patiently waiting and biding their time and playing the game, and they're left on the outside looking in tomorrow, that is going to create a difficult few weeks for the Prime Minister. Again, the option is to either plug immediate holes and say, so this is really just about, kind of the mechanics.
Yeah.
But if they start making some bigger moves, then that's going to, cause a little more frustration, I suspect, with the backbench that have been playing this game, because it's like, well, why them and not me? And I've been loyal and they've not been. The fact we're talking about Nathaniel Erskine-Smith,
That's an interesting
one of his
one, yeah.
biggest, most vocal critics. Jagmeet Singh has been more loyal to the Prime Minister than Nathaniel Erskine-Smith, and this guy's going to be Housing Minister.
I don't know if that's quite true, but it's a good point. It's definitely a good line. Shachi, quick last word, then we got to take a break and pick it up after the commercial. Quick last word to you.
Well, none of us have crystal balls, but I would say that the betting people among us would probably bet that, unlike what Kate just pointed out in terms of the big moves, this is probably going to be very much a manage expectations, plug the holes, put the people in, hopefully, hope for the best in terms of caucus revolting, and just try to get to Christmas. Try to get to a timeout. Try to get to a place where not only does he have time to reflect, but also time to actually catch breath and figure out what does a possible prorogation look like. They can prorogue until mid-March without having to worry about supply. So I think it's really just about get to the end of the week, try not to have any more crises, and, just everyone take a time out and take a break.
Yeah, I think they only prorogue if there's going to be a leadership, but who knows? At least that was the thinking this week, but who knows what next week will bring. Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc put rumors to rest today, saying former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney will not be taking his job during tomorrow's cabinet shuffle.
When the Prime Minister asked me to be the Finance Minister, he told me that I was going to be the Finance Minister in his government until the next election, that I was going to be the Finance Minister to present the next budget, and 2025 will be an election year. So that's the work that I'm doing. And again, I wasn't part of any conversations with Mr. Carney, but Mr. Carney isn't about to become Canada's finance minister in the short term.
Okay, let's bring back the power panel to talk about this and more about the cabinet shuffle. Cameron Ahmad, Andrew Thompson, Shachi Kurl, and Kate Harrison. Kate, Mark Carney has been an interesting figure in the Liberal story for the past 6-12 months, in that always talked about, always courted, never in, but always there as part of the narrative and a catalyzing factor in the departure of Chrystia Freeland. What do you make of this? Where does this leave Mark Carney if he truly does have political ambitions?
Yeah, the phantom of the Liberal Party. I think that he is probably politically wounded after this week. In thinking about the folks that, would support a leadership race and maybe if he has that long-term ambition, by being so absent from this week, I don't know how loyal party supporters can look at that absence and say, there's a guy with some political accountability that I want to support for the long-term game. I think it is clear that he is just not that into running.
Okay, you stole my line.
Sorry, we did not coordinate, I promise. But he is far less interested in this than everybody else seems to want him to be. And if he is interested in it, boy, he has a really funny way of showing it. So I think that he is politically damaged after this week. And any attempt to, I think he was going to have a hard time creating distance. But I think if there was a desire to try and build a bit of loyalty within the Liberal Party around him, I think that that's going to be very challenging at this point.
Shachi, I don't know if you've recovered to find another line, but it's remarkable that you can end a week politically damaged, as Kate says, with never having run, never having served, and not having spoken. Somehow those things, because there was reporting, and I have similar indications that it had progressed to a further point than it ever had. There's some conversation about what riding he would go in. David McGuinty's Ottawa South riding has been mentioned in some reports as where Mark Carney was going to run, and now David McGuinty is going into cabinet tomorrow, and Mark Carney is not. I mean, what do you make of this whole Mark Carney melodrama that's played out?
Well, I would say that in terms of damage, ultimately it is the party, the brand, the Prime Minister that ends up more damaged than Mark Carney. He's still got a pretty good gig over at Brookfield Asset Management.
Well, he'll be fine.
He's got a pretty nice life. And if things are as dire as we think they are for the Liberals, and I would say yes, looking at the data, looking at the numbers, fighting for basically third place in terms of vote intention, possibly facing the worst vote turnout in terms of popular vote since Michael Ignatieff. Like that's pretty bad prospects. If you're Mark Carney and you still want to come back, you'll come back on your own terms. But hopefully this puts paid and puts an end to these bloody notes that the Liberals keep passing, Mark. Like, do you like me? Do you like me more than a friend? Will you come to cabinet with me? Will you be my finance minister?
Stop dating.
Stop.
Let's get married.
Just just where is the dignity? Just stop now for a while. Leave Mark Carney alone. Mark Carney, stop winky, nudgy, elbowing the fact that maybe you want to come and just, it has been a distraction and the parlor game, not only of the parliamentary precinct, but also of Bay Street. And nothing good has come of it. If anything, it has been a disastrous week for this government around it. And even if he was associated with it or not, it doesn't look good. It is not a good look to have been the putative person poised to come in when a respected finance minister, a respected loyalist and heavy hitter and strong woman in the Trudeau cabinet just decides to leave because of the humiliation that is being provided to her and being put in front of her, and she says, hell no. Mark Carney's name is associated with that. It's probably good for him to take, I used the phrase time out before the break. It's probably good for him to disappear for a while from this conversation too.
Yeah, Andrew, it's interesting because, look, we've not heard from Mark Carney, publicly, and there is reporting by everybody now that Chrystia Freeland was told in the Zoom meeting on Friday that she's going to be replaced by him. There's been no comment, no denial, no clarification, no explanation coming from the Prime Minister's office on that whatsoever. So it's out there now as an accepted fact. I mean, where does this leave the whole thing?
Well, this is, again, back to our earlier conversation, why we need to have the Prime Minister say something tomorrow to clear the air on this. I doubt that he will, but that is still needing to get sorted out over the next coming weeks of how did Chrystia Freeland get to the position where she felt she was forced out of the cabinet. The thing with Mark Carney that's interesting is the appeal of Carney is that there's this sense, and I'm assuming it's in the electorate generally, that there's nobody in the government on the front benches, on the opposition benches, that really knows how to effectively run the government. Who could in fact be a very strong voice against Trump, who has those kind of basics of understanding how the economy needs to grow. That seems to be the piece that was always the appeal of Mark Carney. The appeal for Mark Carney to come in was that he might become the Prime Minister. That's now largely off the table. There's no way that you can imagine Mark Carney coming into this mess. There's no way you could see him really as the type of leader that's going to sit there, maybe in the fourth place spot like the Liberals had back in 2008. I mean, it's just not likely that that's going to happen. He's not a builder kind of a politician. So I think in a lot of ways, the whole Mark Carney story will now, as much as Cameron had suggested, just be gone. This is now largely done. And the question is, what does the government have instead to address those issues that Canadians do have, which is, how do you, who in the government does know how to put the economy back together? Who does know how to drive that growth? And that's the question that they're going to have to start to try to answer over the next couple of months.
Well, Cameron, he's still, unless something has changed, part of this advisory panel on economic growth for the Liberal Party to get ready for the next election. And the selling point, too, of Mark Carney is he's a serious guy with an incredible resume who knows how to deal with the serious issues, right? And that was the appeal of it. But where do you think he is now in terms of his potential for an entrance into politics, whether it's in some future cabinet running or running in the leadership if there is one?
That's all we can do is speculate further. He is all those things you said. He is an impressive person with an impressive track record and highly respected, I think, globally. And I think it's also not bad for someone like that to be talked about from a global perspective, to be talked about as, hey, maybe this guy's going to be the finance minister. Maybe he's a contender to be prime minister. That is helpful for someone's reputation, I think, in a macro sense when you're looking at it internationally. But within the Liberal Party, I haven't polled all members, but I don't think that there is much of an appetite. There's certainly a lot of chatter and speculation about people who would be well positioned after the Prime Minister has decided to move on. But I really don't know, and I don't think it's worth much more time at all speculating on it. I think from the government's perspective, it's not been helpful to have these rumors fuel so many stories and so many sources speaking about potential outcomes that have not materialized. What they need to do, as the Prime Minister takes this time to reflect, which can't take very long, they have to focus on two very specific things. One is project confidence and competence with the upcoming Trump White House, which is already an extremely tall task given what's happened this week. And two, is maintain unity for the Liberal Party and put the party in, however difficult things are now, in the best possible position to handle an election, which is going to come at some point next year. Yeah. And the one last quick thing I'll say is I don't think that either the Prime Minister or Chrystia Freeland wanted this outcome this week. I think there's still a deal of mutual respect between them. A partnership that was built over 10 years that has dealt with such monumental things, I really think and hope doesn't have to end forever this way. I think this is just a really unfortunate and sad outcome that probably could have been avoided, but hopefully doesn't spell the end of that partnership in the years to come.
No, I think you're 100% right that neither one of them wanted this outcome because, you know, she did in fact go to that caucus meeting Monday night and hugged the Prime Minister at the end of it, which is a remarkable, a surreal moment in a surreal week. But, you know, Cameron, I know the speculation and sort of, you know, about what may or might happen, but so much of what led up to what did happen on Monday, somebody in the Prime Minister's office, I don't know who it is, was speaking to the Globe and Mail and talking trash about the finance minister because she confirmed all of it and more in her letter, right? So, I mean, you've got to get a handle on that, don't you? If you're Justin Trudeau and Katie Telford and the people who are running that office, and you're going to try to go forward with a cabinet tomorrow and figure out why all of this happened the way it did.
Yes.
How do you do that, Cameron? How do you do that, Cameron? Please.
Absolutely. Focus on the things that there are two, like I said, I think from their there are two really important things over just the next few weeks that have to dominate all of their focus. And that is preparing for Trump White House and dealing with that. We already know what some of the threats are, and there's so much more that could happen. And two, from a partisan perspective, is making sure the party's in good shape and being in a position to talk about what it's accomplished for people, to talk about why their solutions are better than the Conservatives. It seems, as where we sit and from the point we're speaking at today, it seems impossible, it seems extremely difficult, but you know, if they're going to keep fighting and keep going, that is what they have to focus on. Right.
So Kate, kind of bring this back where the whole thing began. I mean, how long do you think the Prime Minister can wait before he gives his decision? I don't know when he's going to make it. Maybe he's already made it. But if we don't hear from him tomorrow on exactly what he's going to do, Christmas week's not a good time to do it. I mean, but, you know, is it first week of January, January 1, January 6th, which is the Monday? Like, how quickly do you think Justin Trudeau needs to give his caucus, his government, and his country an answer?
It depends on if you consider if he's making the decision for himself or for the betterment of the Liberal Party and trying to set them up for success. I have observed nothing to suggest that he is concerned about anybody's job security or the future other than his own. So I'm not sure that the timing really does matter to him. I think Cameron pointed out that you need at least a couple of months to run a leadership race, like at least.
No, it's like 4, really,
I would argue
by the Constitution.
Order, yes. Yeah. And so that is going to push us into, at the earliest, April, May. We will be 2 or 3 months into one of the biggest and most important negotiations in the country's history. I think I come back to the fact that it is not possible to walk and chew gum at the same time on this. You cannot be fighting the internal political battles that the Prime Minister is fighting and communicating effectively with the White House when half of the people around Cabinet are ostensibly vying for his position. Doesn't matter who he brings in tomorrow. So I do not think that it is possible, and that is why I think he sticks around. I think he sticks around because it is not going to be in the best interest of Canada in this moment, he will argue, to have a leadership race. That's why, in my book, an election is what is needed, not a resignation.
Right. Go ahead, Andrew, quickly.
Well, I was going to say, I think where Kate lands is probably what is in the best hopes that Trudeau sees coming forward. Because what he has coming out of this, we move into January, he'll start to move over to the need for a united front within Canada. I think you could see him reaching out to Doug Ford to ask him to play a bigger role on behalf of the premiers. Ford is certainly chomping at the bit to do so. It helps undermine criticisms from the Conservatives that their views aren't being heard. You've got also the Prime Minister coming out of this week with an ability to say to Liberals, and I would expect he'll be testing this message over the next few days, if not me, who? Arnie's not in the picture anymore. Freeland's been hugely divisive in terms of her departure, as much as the blame is widely shared for that. If not those people, who is there that could actually lead the Liberal Party?
Right.
And I think that that's what, in Trudeau's interests, is one of his strong cards within the Liberal Party, which is it comes back to, it's him.
Okay, we're out of time, but Shachi, 20 seconds. How long do you think the Prime Minister can wait? If we don't get the answer before Christmas, how long into 2025?
Easily into the spring, longer, I think.
To give an
We'll
answer
see.
on his reflection, you think?
Oh no, he'll come out tomorrow and say, I'm not going anywhere. If I'm a betting woman, that's what I think. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think for all of the reasons that Kate and Andrew just pointed out, plus, we've seen data that shows that the pretenders to the throne, maybe they invigorate the Liberal base, but they're not exactly bringing back lapsed Liberal voters who have drifted one way and another. He will try and change the channel, turn the page, and try and talk about Trump and where Canada stands.
Okay, well, we'll see. Cabinet Shuffle Special, we start at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I want to thank you all. Cameron Ahmad, Andrew Thompson, Shachi Curl, and Kate Harrison.